Major League Baseball in a lot of ways has really led sports and kind of taking a strong role in promoting positive social change. And Billy's been in the middle of that. And I think in the wake of the coronavirus, I think sports can really provide a forum for kind of healing and bringing people back together. But it's obviously going to be super challenging. And I just wanted to talk to Billy about kind of how Major League Baseball is thinking of that, and also talk about his background so you can get to know him a bit. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to your current role at Major League Baseball.
I'm a former Major League Baseball player. I played 6 years in the big leagues. I was in the big leagues at 21 years old. Grew up in a very religious military family, oldest of 5 boys. And my dad was super strict, and he was in the Marine Corps and was very, very strong with me as the oldest son to try to set an example. And the reason that I guess that is relevant is because it took me a while to come to terms with my sexual orientation. And I'm one of 2 players in the 151-year history of Major League Baseball that has ever played in the major leagues that has publicly disclosed that they were gay. And I didn't know that when I was playing. The other player played in the 70s. I played for the Detroit Tigers, LA Dodgers, and San Diego Padres. And for the last half of my career, I got married very young to my college girlfriend, and tried to be the golden child and the good son, and not really understanding myself because I had never met anybody. I'm 55 years old, and I was in the big leagues in 1987. I grew up in that generation without a computer, and if you wanted to, it was a dangerous time. So, and I guess in the spirit of the brevity of our time, I was living a double life. I got divorced when I met someone, and basically had a secret double life while I was playing the last 3 years in the big leagues. And what happened was the night before my last year in the major leagues, my partner died of HIV-related causes, and I did not know that he was HIV positive until about 30 days before he passed away. And I tried to navigate all of that with my family within 30 miles, coming to my games, completely closeted. They never met him. And in lieu of looking for help in the environment and growing up in pro sports, I just walked away from my career. And I didn't think that anybody would ever care about that until my story came out publicly around the year 2000. And the reality of how few role models there were, especially male role models that were gay, that had reached the highest levels of Major League sports. The LGBT community came after me. It was really looking for me to become a role model of some kind. And I was my dad's son. I was really living in shame and feeling like someone like me. I literally did not think I belonged to or deserved to be in the big leagues because, in 1994, when this happened, the doctor that I saw basically looked me in the eye and said, "You're HIV negative now, but you'll become positive probably in the next 18 months because you've been exposed to," and I was carrying that to the park. And it was just a lot to navigate through. And I just walked away from baseball. And I was away, and over the years, as my story started to become more and more prominent, baseball, ironically, asked me back to become its very first ambassador for inclusion. And that was in early 2014. And as Jim said, baseball has really led the way, but there was no definition for a job like that. No one else, no other sporting league had hired someone like me. And I basically just told the commissioner at that time, it was Bud Selig, that I would be happy to take on this initiative, but it would have to be by invitation. I didn't want it to be like a mandatory checklist type of environment that I would felt like I would be completely unwelcome. And one of the great surprises of my life was the relationships. I had actually played with or against 27 of the 30 managers that were active in 2014, and was embraced in a way as a former player that I don't think may have happened to somebody who was maybe a professional in the D&I universe, which really didn't even have a name in 2014. It's amazing how far we've come. And so my job has changed and grown dramatically over that time, but it started out basically as a former player walking into a clubhouse of big league players by invitation and sharing a really dark time in my life. MLB Network made a documentary about my life. What's hard to understand is during that time, only one athlete, Jason Collins, is one of my best friends, is the only athlete still to this day in American Major League sports to ever come out while he was an active player. We have a long way to go, but I think sports and our fans, there is an expectation that didn't exist before. And I think MLB now really, where they may have avoided it for a long time and really sort of lived off the legacy of the great Jackie Robinson, now understands that as the sport of Jackie Robinson, the responsibility never goes away. And we have to continue to embrace acceptance and equality at every opportunity.
Could you talk a little bit about the role that you think Major League Baseball can play as we come out of the epidemic, and how Major League Baseball is thinking about that reentry and what the kind of messaging is around that?
I think baseball has a couple of things to build off in a way that not mirrors exactly this epidemic or pandemic, but coming off of World War II, understanding the way baseball players can inspire and lift the spirits and our sport. Our sport moves slowly. I think you get to know the players in a way that is a little different from the NFL or NBA. We may have people that are homebound for a lot longer than anticipated. And the TV networks really are trying to align with baseball and figure out a safe solution. It seems like when you get close to a solution that could put us back on the field, another obstacle reveals itself, or the reality of the scale of how many people it will take to put a viable product back on the field, and that we're just not there with testing and the conversation about privilege and the priority for people who are symptomatic, and all those considerations have to be met. But I do think that there is the idea that if we can bring something that is a form of entertainment that is, in real time, that we may capture the spirit and maybe use that platform to be a great messenger to help people, if only to, consistent reminders of why we're at home, how to take care of ourselves, how to help, move that process along.
What do you think that it looks like, that reentry? There's been a lot of, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I think that there's a few of us here. So we've been following it very closely. There's been a lot of speculation and talks about, an all Arizona and lots of other scenarios. And it seemed like it was just not going to happen. But now lately it seemed more positive, like that there's active exploration, and it seems like it might actually happen. What's your handicap of what will happen and the odds of us seeing any baseball this year now?
I think we got about 3 more weeks before a definitive answer will be made one way or another about this summer. And, it's just tough. You're sitting there. None of us can do our jobs the way we want to when there's no product, for our fans, or and all the changes that are coming with this situation that nobody was anticipating. So I think I'm always optimistic. We have some really smart people that work at baseball, and there's a lot of people that are aligning together. I think there's complications, to be perfectly honest, from state to state, the way the conversations from governors, there are different opinions about what is safe and what isn't. And at the end of the day, if you're talking about Arizona, you're talking about Florida, or indoor stadiums, centralizing, it's going to look different, the product. And I think that they're, for purists, how much are we willing to concede in order to get an abbreviated season? This is what I mean about the questions continue to roll out. And
what do you think the answer to that is? Like, what's the sort of drop dead day of, like, if we get past just July 1st or what is it, then it's just too short.
Yeah,
it could be a plausible season.
Well, we got to get the players back into spring training. So if you're talking, mid-July, it takes 2 to 3 weeks, either that or we're going to have tremendous amount of injuries. And as everybody was, as we were, just talking it briefly before we went live here, people are in their homes. Guys are not out running wind sprints. The intentions are there, but some can't go outside, and some are taking care of their children. And I just think that nobody's body's really going to really understand exactly what it felt like to be quarantined for 7 weeks until they get back out there. And we have to be cognizant of the long-term health. The Yankees just signed Garrett Cole to a 9-year deal. If he goes out too soon and starts trying to throw 100 miles an hour because he's anxious, it could have a devastating effect. And we have to help the players help themselves as well. They have to agree to be willing to go back out there. And if 5 of our 10 top superstars don't want to play because their families don't feel it's safe, then that's a consideration that needs to be made.
Got a couple more quick ones for you. One is to get a feel for how much of a traditionalist you are versus the new school. Okay. What do you think of the 3-batter rule and some of the other rule changes that have been sort of bannered about?
The purist in me, I understand. Nobody gets more upset than baseball fans when a rule gets changed. NFL changes rules all the time, and nobody seems to be bothered by it. The idea that if Oscar Robertson or Jerry West could have had a 3-point line and see what their careers would have looked like. But for me, I remember watching Barry Bonds, play. I played against him when I was in the Padres for 3 years. He was in the Giants. He never stepped his foot out of the batter's box once. He stayed right in there. There are ways that we can move the game along. I think the 3-batter rule is aggressive, and I like that better than putting a man on second base with no outs in the extra innings. That one feels like intramural sports to me, and that is going to be.
That's a tough one for me too.
Yeah, it really is. But for the long-term well-being, it's interesting being a part of the process that makes those considerations. That there's a rule that we were testing out in independent league that if a catcher missed a pitch, what would be a pass ball or a wild pitch, he could run to first base. That would take me 10 years to remember to run to first base if that was a rule, and it's a free base. So they're tough, Jim. They are, but we have to think about keeping our game interesting. I would say that maybe soccer fans probably have the same type of purist. They don't want to see something change, yet they are fighting for the global market as well. And I think baseball has begun to really understand the way soccer markets themselves and their players. And if a fan can become connected to a great player like Mike Trout or Aaron Judge, maybe the rule changes won't be so painful if we can just keep, a great product on the field with great athletes.